Chapter 19. Into the Black Down Under. We have to leave the old lady's place because, you never know, the cops might come knocking on each door. They're like bugs, my father says. They're not too smart, but there's lots of them, and they keep at it. On the other side of the alley is this boarded-up building. It used to be part of the Testaments until a fire burned it out, and my father decides we'll hide there until Iggy gets a car for us. He reaches out and pulls off a big piece of plywood with one hand. The screechy noise the nails make sounds like a cat fight, and the next thing, there's a real cat, a black one, that leaps out from behind the plywood. My father jumps so hard, he yanks me to the ground, and I bump my head. "Dumb animal," he says. "Get up now. That's just a scratch. A little blood never hurt a man." It doesn't hurt, and anyhow, I sort of like the taste of salt in my mouth. Makes me feel awake. "Get in there," he says, and then he's pulling me through this old burned-out window, and we're inside the building. Everything is black and wet and dripping, except for where snow has come down through holes in the roof. Most of the inside walls are gone, and you can see where the center beam was chewed by the fire. All the old pipes and wires are hanging down, and everywhere underfoot is broken glass the color of smoke. "I used to wonder exactly what hell looked like," he says. "Now I know." He finds a place where the stairs go down into the basement, and he pulls away the boards and planks. "You should feel right at home," he says, "cooped up like you were in that cellar hole." It's so dark he has to use a cigarette lighter, and the flame is so puny you still can't see to the bottom of the stairs. "You go first," he says. "We can't have both of us on the same step. It might break." The steps are made of thick wood, but slick and punky soft where the water has been dripping all these years, and I can feel how it sags under my feet. There's a rail that's hard to grab with my hands tied, and the way he's holding up the lighter, you might as well keep your eyes closed because it's that dark you can't see a thing. I slip and start to fall, and then he's pulling back on the rope, and I'm hanging there in the middle of the air with my feet skittering, and he's going, "Easy does it, boy. We'll take this one step at a time." Finally, we get to the bottom. There's a little slant of light coming through the narrow cellar window, enough so we can feel our way around all the burned junk that has fallen through the floor. "The accommodations could be better," he says. "I'll grant you that. Soon as Iggy fixes things, we'll be on our way." He ties my feet back up and loops the rope tight around this old busted-up boiler that's tipped over, so I can't move or see what's behind me. "Understand you can't be trusted quite yet," he says. "Once we get on the road, things will be different. You'll get smarter every mile we put between us and this place." He rips a piece off my shirt and ties it on my mouth so I can't be shouting, he says, and wake up the neighborhood. He rubs his hand through my hair again, real gentle. I'm pretty sure there's this sweet smile on his face, although it's so dim you can't be sure. "You sit tight here a minute," he says. "I have to see a man about a car." Then he's gliding away, and I hold myself still in case this is a trick and he's really sneaking up behind me to see if I can get my hands loose, which I can't. They're numb and bloated from the rope cutting into my wrists, and finally I stop trying and just sit there letting my eyes open up in the dark. I can barely make out that narrow window, hardly big enough so a cat could slip through, and under it is this big pile of coal, slagged up against the foundation wall. Overhead, there's creaking with the weight of him moving around, trying to be light on his feet. I'm listening to him up there and trying to see out that little window when something moves against the light. I'm pretty sure there's a scratching sound coming from the window, except you can't always believe what you hear in the dark. Then, whatever it is goes away, and I'm thinking it was probably a cat, or maybe a dog sniffing around. Finally, I just keep still, because the more I move, the tighter the rope gets. Next thing, I hear someone on the steps, these light feet trying to be real quiet, and then a flashlight comes on, and this woman's voice says, "You there, kid?" Loretta Lee. I can't say anything because of the gag. All I can do is sort of kick around a little, let her know where I am. You can tell by her shaky, thin voice she's scared of the dark.
kid. Tell me that's you. Oh, Lord Jesus, what am I doing down here?
Then the beam of that flashlight is hitting me right in the eyes, and she's tripping over stuff, trying to get to me. First thing she does is pull the gag off, and I take a deep, deep breath that makes my lungs burn.
It ain't right, she whispers. Keeping your own kid tied up, it ain't right. He ain't the man I thought I remembered, that's for sure.
I want to say something, but I'm not sure what, and anyhow, my mouth is too dry. She's put the flashlight on the floor, aiming it up so she can try to untie the rope.
The man is a genius for knots, she says.
I can feel how her hands are shaking as she's fumbling around. Also, I can hear the boards creaking overhead, but you can't be sure. It might be just the wind. Loretta goes,
The plan is, Iggy keeps him busy while I get you loose. Now, isn't that a good plan? There's enough cops up there to start a war. We'll be safe enough if we get out of this godforsaken place.
Her hands are pulling at the rope, nervous and quick, but the knots just keep getting tighter. Finally, she gets this idea to cut the rope on the ragged edge of the boiler.
I saw this in a movie once, she whispers. I forget what movie.
She's working the rope against the sharp edge of that old boiler, and sure enough, it cuts through. Just the one cut won't do it, though, and she has to do it twice more before my wrists get loose, and I can't really help much because my hands are all numb and swollen.
Next thing is this piece around your ankles, she says. I sure can't carry you up out of here. You think you can walk if I get this loose?
Yes, ma'am, I say. That makes her giggle.
My, ain't we got plight all of a sudden, she says. There, that should about do it.
My feet come loose and I try to stand up and I have to lean some of my weight on her. She goes,
Just a second, sugar. Let me get this flashlight.
She bends over for the flashlight, and then she's making this sound like something is caught in her throat. 2 big hands are squeezing her neck. I see how my father is coming, huge out of the dark, and he's got his hands around her throat, shoving her back. You ignorant creature, he says. I'll teach you to put your dirty hands on my son. Loretta can't say anything. She's sinking down to her knees and trying to pull his hands away from her neck, but it's useless. She can't stop him. He's squeezing her dead with his bare hands, and no one can stop him. No one. No one. He strikes again. Even a total goon like me knows you can't stop Killer Kane, but I go ahead and try anyhow. My hands are still numbed out and I can hardly walk, so all I can do is sort of fall on top of him and try to shove him loose from her. I'm going, Stop! I see you! I see you! Daddy, please, please stop! You're killing her! He just twitches my hand away. He's made of iron and steel. He's gritting his teeth and squeezing her neck. You can see the whites of her eyes, and she's not even trying to get away anymore. I try to get between them and I'm going, I saw you kill her. I saw you kill Mom. I never forgot. Not ever. I know you did it. I know. It's like I'm trapped underwater or something. So weak and floaty I can't hardly fight him. Can't pry his fingers loose from my mother's neck, from Loretta's neck, because everything is mixed up and he's doing the same thing to Loretta Lee he did to my mom, choking the life out of her. And he's got that same cold killer look because he wants her to die, like he wanted Mom to die, and nothing else matters except what he wants. I'm there in the dark, pushing at him. The light catches her eyes, and I can see her looking at me. She's so far away, it's like I'm 4 years old again, peeking out from behind the bedroom door, and then running to bang my little fists at him while the light fades from her eyes. I can't get him loose of her, so all I can do is keep screaming, I know you killed her! I saw you! I saw you do it! You killed her, and I'll never forget! Not ever! Finally, he kind of jerks his head, and I can feel him looking at me, and then his hands open. Loretta slips away, and I can hear her breathing like a broken bird in the cellar dark. What? He says, reaching for me. What did you say? I saw you do it, I say. I saw you kill my mother. You weren't but 4 years old, he says, and now his big hands are starting to curl around my neck, except he's holding me soft. I can feel his heart beating and his cool breath in my face that makes me want to fall asleep. You can't possibly recall that event, he says. You think you can, but you can't. I can, I say. I do. That's the poison they put in your mind, boy. They brainwashed you into thinking you can remember. He's pulling me closer, holding me soft by the neck, and now I can feel the pulse in his hands. They never talk about it, I say. They don't have to because I can't ever forget it, no matter how much I try. No, he says, and his face is so close I can feel the heat rising off him. Impossible. You can't. You were wearing your brown corduroy trousers, I say, talking so fast it makes me shake inside, and the black t-shirt with no sleeves. I tried to stop you and I couldn't, and you carried me back into my room and put me to bed and told me I was just dreaming. You locked me in that room and I ran to the window and broke it with my hand and started yelling for someone to come and help Mommy. My father sighs and says, Lord, I wish you hadn't done that, boy. It cost me years. They caught you, Daddy, and they put you away forever, except when you fooled them and they let you go. I have to clean this up, he says, like he's talking to himself alone. I have to clean this up and get out of here. That's when his hands start to tighten hard and fast around my neck. I'm trying to fight, but I'm so small and weak, and he's so big and strong, you can't stop him. No one can stop Killer Kane. He squeezes and squeezes and squeezes. I'm in this faraway place, falling backwards real slow and dreamy when I hear a window breaking. Then a small faraway voice is saying, Put your hands up, villain! And I really am falling, and the air is coming back into my lungs so fast it hurts. I'm lying there all crumpled up sideways. I can see Freak. He's rolled down through the cellar window into the pile of coal, and he's trying to stand up. I'm warning you, he says in that fierce, bold way he has. He's got a squirt gun, one of those big blaster models that holds about a gallon of water. Killer Kane is looking at me. He's looking at Loretta, all crumpled and moaning. He's looking at Freak. Then he shakes his head and goes, I know a real gun when I see it, you little monster. He makes a move, reaching out. Freak scuttles back a little ways, but he can't really run, and even if he could, there's no place to go. This is your partner in crime, Killer Kane says to me. I guess maybe you are a retard after all. Freak is pointing the squirt gun right in his face, and he says, Guess what I got for Christmas, Mr. Kane? Guess right, because your life depends on it. Killer Kane doesn't say anything. He's just reaching out real slow because he knows that Freak can't get away. This squirt gun, Freak says, and a chemistry set. That's what I got for Christmas. Killer Kane just looks at the squirt gun. He shakes his head, like, who are you kidding? Sulfuric acid, Freak says, raising up the gun and sighting along the barrel. Good old, reliable H2SO4, an oily, colorless, corrosive liquid used in dyes, paints, explosives, and many chemical experiments. Killer Kane says, You're lying, kid. You can't fool me. That's when Freak squeezes the trigger and sprays him right in the eyes. Then Killer Kane is screaming in this high, scared voice. His hands are scrubbing at his eyes, and it's like that scream wakes me up, because the next thing I know, I've got Freak in my arms, and I'm running through the dark for the stairs, running as fast as I can, on feet I can't even feel. Go! Freak is yelling. He's right behind you! Go! I can't look back, but I can feel him, feel the icy cold breath of him on the back of my neck, and the hands reaching blind to grab me, and then I'm going up the stairs, just flying. The steps are breaking under my feet, and he's howling in rage behind me. His hands are scrabbling at my ankles, and for just a second, he has me. I kick loose, and then we're up on the first floor, bursting out of the cellar hole. I can see daylight coming through the boarded-up plywood, and I cover Freak with my arms and just dive right through that plywood. Wham! The sunlight blinds me, and we're skitter-rolling through the clean, cold snow. Hands are grabbing at me, and I'm fighting to get away. Easy, a voice says. Take it easy, kid. You're okay. Iggy Lee. He's looking down at me with red eyes, and you can see where he's been chewing at his beard. I'm sitting there in the snow, squinting up at Iggy and all these cops. There must be a million cops. And Freak is laughing like a maniac and saying, It worked! He fell for it! Soap and vinegar and curry powder. It worked like a charm! I don't understand what he's talking about right then. It's only later I figure out there wasn't any real acid in the squirt gun. It was soap and vinegar and curry powder that made Killer Kane think his eyes were burning up. Killer Kane, who is still rubbing frantic at his eyes and begging for help when they put the handcuffs on him and shove him into the back of a police van. All I've got room to think about is poor Loretta. That's what I'm telling the cops, that she's down there in the cellar. I'm afraid that no one is listening, but they must be, because right away they're bringing her up out of the cellar and Iggy is running to her and crying out her name. "She's still breathing," somebody says. Then Graham is shoving through the crowd of cops and Grim is right behind her, and Gwen is there too, and everybody is making a big, sloppy fuss, especially Graham, who's hugging me so tight I can't hardly breathe. The fair Gwen is hugging Freak and she's saying, "I told you to stay in that car, didn't I? Didn't I?" Freak, he's looking over her shoulder at me, looking over Graham's shoulder, and he gives me the thumbs up as she carries him away. "Freak the Mighty," he says. "Freak the Mighty strikes again." Chapter 21. The Accident of Nature. We all of us had to go down to the police station, of course, where they took a bunch of pictures of the bruises on my neck, and then they insisted I needed x-rays, and so we had to go over to the hospital and get that done, and then go back to the police station again, which wore on my nerves almost as much as being kidnapped. Grim, the second time we go to the cops, he's sitting there in this room with me waiting, and he says, "I can't tell you what it felt like. Coming up out of the basement, seeing that double track of footprints in the snow, I knew it was him. I just knew in my heart." He kept insisting that Graham go home, which she finally did, because we were there at the police station for hours more, me telling all about it over and over until I thought I would faint dead away if just one more person asked me what happened after I woke up in the dark and was stolen from my own bed. Grim, he just keeps patting me on the arm and saying, "This is important, Max. Maybe this time they'll lock him up for good." That's what everybody keeps saying, that this time they've got Killer Kane where they want him, in violation of parole, in violation of a restraining order, abduction of a minor, and 2 counts of attempted murder, me and the heroic biker babe, which is what the papers took to calling Loretta Lee. The word is she's hurt pretty bad because she cracked a bone in her neck, but she'll be okay in the long run. Iggy, when I saw him that time in the hospital waiting, he was chewing a hole right through his beard. He was so worried, and it made me think he wasn't such a bad dude after all. It all goes to show, like Grimm says, that you can't always judge a book by the cover. It turns out to be a pretty weird Christmas vacation, as you might imagine, and Graham keeps fussing at me and won't let me sleep in the cellar. "I don't care if he is under lock and key," she says. Grim, he says, please humor the woman. She's worried about to death, and so I sleep upstairs on the fold-out, and at night Graham keeps checking to see if I'm there, which is a pain, but she can't help herself, and anyhow, I'm just as glad not to be alone in the Down Under. Freak, well, the fair Gwen just about threw a fit when she got him home because of him disobeying a direct order and sneaking away to rescue me, but after a while she calms down and all she does is just look at him and shake her head. "What am I going to do with you?" she asks. "Put me up for adoption," he says. "I want to go live with the Waltons." He means the TV show that keeps repeating, and of course he's teasing her, but the fair Gwen is not amused. "No more crazy adventures or dangerous quests, young man. You have to be careful," she keeps saying. "Extra careful." She means the trouble he has sometimes catching his breath because of the way his insides keep growing faster than his outside, which hasn't really grown at all. Freak goes into the medical research place every few months now, which he says is a real pain, not that it actually hurts. "Dr. Spivak says my unique status as a marvel of genetic aberration makes me an object of intense curiosity," he says in that lofty way of his. "Specialists from the world over are familiar with my case." "What about the secret operation?" I ask when the fair Gwen can't hear us. "The one where you'll get a robot body?" Freak gets this very cool scientific look on his face, and he always says the same thing.
The bionic research continues, my friend. The work goes on.
I don't know why I keep asking, because it gives me the creeps. You'd think I could be as cool as Freak about the idea, because it's him that's going to get a new bionic body, but just thinking about it makes me want to jump up and run around. I keep telling Graham that when Freak is in the hospital for his tests, I shouldn't have to go to school because we're like a team, but she won't buy it.
I know Kevin has been a great help to you, she says, but you've got a brain of your own, haven't you, dear?
Yeah, right. The other thing about school that's different after Christmas vacation is how jealous everybody is that we got our pictures in the paper and on the local TV. Mrs. Donnelly in English class calls us the dynamic duo, and she put a cutout picture from the paper up on the bulletin board. Wouldn't you know, some goon put mustaches on us the very first day. Freak says he looks cool with a mustache, and he can't wait to grow one, and he makes Mrs. Donnelly leave the picture up. Me, I just as soon forget about the whole thing. I really hate the idea of having to testify at the trial and tell what really happened, but everybody says I have to if I want him locked up for the rest of his life, which I do, especially after what he tried to do to poor Loretta, who was only trying to help.
They can't make you if you don't want to, Freak says. A son doesn't have to testify against his father.
Grim thinks it'll do me good. Plus, he's really worried he'll get off again or fool the jury by quoting the Bible.
Grim worries too much, Freak says.
Everybody worries too much. The way it finally turns out with Killer Kane, Freak is right, because just before the trial is supposed to start, and I've got my fingernails chewed down to the second knuckle, Grim gets this telephone call that makes him punch his fist in the air and go, "Yes! Yes!" What happened? They made a deal, and Killer Kane pled guilty, which means he has to serve out the rest of his original sentence plus 10 more years. He'll be an old man when he gets out, Grim says. He'll be older than me. That should make me happy, but instead I feel really weird and worried, and Grim, who still thinks he knows everything, says I just have to get used to the idea. The man is an accident of nature, he says. All you got from him is your looks and your size. You've got your mother's heart, and that's what counts. The weird thing I keep thinking about, what if something happens when I get older and I turn out to be another accident of nature? Grim sees me thinking about that one night just before bed, and he sits on the end of the fold-out and he says, "Things will make a lot more sense when you finish growing up, Maxwell. Now sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite." Grim means well, I know that, but sometimes he says the numbest things, because it's growing up that worries me.